Good evening. The Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs is scheduled to discuss the disinvestment of the Steel Authority of India Limited. Today, the government had decided to sell off its 10.32% stake in the company through the auction route, and the sale is expected to get the government around 4,000 crore rupees. The divestment target for last year was 40,000 crore rupees, and that ambitious target was not achieved as only Coal India and later then ONGC scrip made it to the markets. Now, during Pranab Mukherjee's last budget, the divestment target was lowered to 30,000 crore rupees. Till date, only the National Buildings and Construction Corporation, or NBCC, that scrip has hit the markets. NBCC is not really a big-ticket stake sale, as it fetched the government just 125 crore rupees. So now the Disinvestment Department is putting its hope in the sale equity offloading, as it is expected to have a favourable response from the markets. Tonight on The Big Picture, we will discuss the divestment scenario as it stands currently in the country. We'll look at the hits and the misses of the past and the present and focus on what other big scripts could be expected this fiscal. I'm going to ask my panel whether the lower target of 30,000 has made any difference and whether the new offer for sale or OFS mechanism could hit the divestment target unfavorably. Joining me in the studio will be Anjun Roy, economic analyst, and Vijay Mehta, who's chairman and CEO of Mefcom Capital Markets Private Limited. We'll also be joined in just a bit by Subhomoy Bhattacharjee, who's the senior editor with the Indian Express now. And in the interest of fair reportage, we will also have a special interview with the man in charge at the Disinvestment Department. But that's for later. I'd like to start the show, however, with Mr. Mehta, if I could. Now, the scrips of sale today settled at 93.15, down 0.53% from the previous closing at BSE. It looks like, from credible sources, of course, that today that decision is not going to be taken. Cabinet approval, the CCA approval will wait for another week or so. Your thoughts on that? It's been delayed before as well.
I think this disinvestment has been delayed a number of times. And I remember about 2 years back when it was almost finalized, that there was a problem of independent directors and it was not meeting the SEBI criteria. But government is under pressure now. They have to go for both economic reforms. They have to lure the foreigners. They have to show that there is no policy paralysis in the finance ministry.
Right.
And more than that, they need money to spend on their social sector reforms.
And cut the deficit, of course. The deficit is a big problem.
That is right.
And going for a stake sale like this will be the shortest way.
But having said that, with the present atmosphere, what's going on as of now, I don't think there is enough market and there is going to be possible that the government would be able to collect 30,000 crores by March 2030.
It looks like a very difficult target.
Yeah.
Anjun Roy, if I ask you this now, the CCEA first gave its approval for the stake sale in April 2010. Now, if my figures are correct, and also an issuance of 10% fresh equity in the company. Now, however, due to some issues with the merchant bankers that they had appointed and volatility in the markets as well, it's been delayed again. Do you not think if it's delayed one more week, will that not hit investor, I don't want to say sentiment, but investor interest in that scrip?
Not really. Some little delay in schedule of sale should not affect investor interest. What is important is whether you are at all keen on selling the shares. There are two aspects. One is disinvestment as such, as a reform measure, and as people are talking about, disinvestment for mobilizing resources. Now, I think disinvestment for mobilizing resources is neither here nor there, because the fiscal deficit is so large. 30,000 will not, even if we make 30,000, that will not make much of a difference. The fiscal deficit is huge. But disinvestment is important because we have in principle decided that government should withdraw from business and for the sake of efficiency. For that purpose, we should pursue disinvestment targets,
right,
and should be on schedule.
Fair point. We'll go to Subhomoy Bhattacharjee, who has just joined us on the program. Welcome, Subhomoy, on The Big Picture. Let me ask you the same question I asked Mr. Anjun Roy. It's been April 2010 was when the CCEA first approved the stake sale, the 10% stake sale in Steel Authority of India Limited. Another delay on the cards, according to some reliable sources, maybe another week or so. Will this not hit investor interest in that particular script?
Yeah, it may not affect the investor interest, but more strongly, as Athar you were saying, it affects the entire schedule of the disinvestment program. We've already gone through one quarter without any disinvestment. We've got 15 companies lined up. The target is 30,000 crore. And within that 30,000 crore, we don't have anything that's moved up till right now. Only one that is there that's going to hit the market is RINL at the end of July, if we are lucky. Meanwhile, there can be gyrations in the market. Europe is sort of unfolding. So there's a lot of ifs and buts in this year. And for the government, as you said, to delay even week, these are like precious time. So essentially, it's not a very happy circumstance.
Right. Tapan Sen has also joined us, senior leader from the CPIM, on the phone line. I've been told, Tapanda, if you can hear me, very few big ticket scripts this fiscal. Apart from SAIL, there's only RINL, Rashtriya Ispat Nigam Limited, that is perhaps on the agenda, has been talked about for a bit. You think the government's target of 30,000 crore that for this fiscal will fall short again? Is it a really ambitious target like last year's?
I shall be the most happiest person if the government fails in making disinvestment.
Right.
I will be the happiest person because this is a crime on the Indian economy. The government is committing to the process of disinvestment. Our party's position is quite clear. So, we consider this to be a crime on the economy, and if government fails, I think we'll be the happiest person, and if government must fail, it is in the interest of the country, it is in the interest of the economy. The government must fail in its target of disinvestment.
Right.
Altogether.
Tapanda, I'm sure the government doesn't really agree with you there, and I had a chat earlier in the day.
Government may agree or don't agree. They have not decided their disinvestment program in agreement with us.
Right.
We are all along opposing this, and we consider this as a crime on the economy. Government, if it goes, so if it's failure, we will always be welcoming their failure. Number one. Number two, at this juncture, if they push through the disinvestment, being blackmailed by the rating agencies and being blackmailed by the media editorials, if they push it through at this time, the price level in the stock market is such that they will be deliberately perpetuating injuries on the public sector.
Fair point, Tapanda. It's important that you say that, and we'll put the perspective. In front of the viewers in any way, because we're going to play for you right now a small interview I did with the Disinvestment Secretary of the Government of India in the Department of Finance. I talked to him later about the challenges I beg your pardon, about the challenges and the delays that the Disinvestment Department has faced through the years, and what really ails the Disinvestment Department. Here's the interview. Take a look. We'll come back after that. It's a pleasure having Mr. Mohammed Haleem Khan, the Disinvestment Secretary, to talk to us on the big picture. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. First of all, I would like to ask you about targets that we had set for this fiscal year for disinvestment. How far do you think we've gone, and how far have we achieved those targets? And what was the target in the first place?
For the year 2012-13, the budget has projected a disinvestment receipt of 30,000 crores. And as you know that once these numbers are firmed up during the budget process, then we go into the preparation of the so-called roadmap. Now in that we interact with large number of ministries which are in charge of CPSEs, government companies, and find out how the ministry and the company reacts to disinvestment in that company. So we have gone through that exercise, and we have broadly identified the companies which can be probably the candidates for disinvestment in this financial year.
Could you mention some of those companies?
Yes, for example, RINL, as you know, is appearing in the newspapers again and again. So they have, started the process. Then Steel Authority is also a candidate, but in that case you have to wait for the government authorization. Then Hindustan Copper is there. BHEL has got government authorization, and that is also in the pipeline. Similarly, we had got in principle agreement from the Defence Ministry with regard to the disinvestment of HAL, but the HAL board is under reconstruction, and because of that it is likely to take a little while.
So
So a large number of companies we have identified. Yes.
As you said, sir, of course, there are so many ministries involved, and there's a long, cumbersome process, and that's why sometimes it takes time. But the target, of course, was around 20. It was diminished from last year's budget because we couldn't meet that 40,000 crore target. Out of that target, how much has the disinvestment department managed to for a stake sale?
Basically, this year we have been able to get proceeds only from one issue, that was NBCC. It started on the last days of 31st of March, so money came into the beginning of this financial year, and that was a very small amount, 125 crores. If all these big ticket, disinvestment take place, then probably we can have a very sensible and good number in this quarter. Yeah.
Sir, one last question to you. I know you're a busy man and you have other things to do, but do you think that the target that we have set for this year, is it realistically achievable, or should we not get our hopes too high? And which ones do you think will be the biggest big ticket options apart from sale?
See, you have to understand one thing, that you see, this is the part of the improvement of governance, corporate governance, and the other part is the resource raising. Now, as far as the improvement in the corporate governance remains, the listing remains the priority, and the Department of Public Enterprises has also flagged this issue that when you sign MOU, the listing aspect should also be factored into the evaluation of a corporate governance aspect of a company. So that is some sort of a perennial requirement. Now, the other thing is about the resource mobilization. Now, in the case of resource mobilization, you have only two options. Either you do the asset sale or you borrow. Now, if asset sale is not feasible at some point of time because of the poor market conditions, and if the realization in the ministry is that the market is not offering the value of the company which it deserves, then there will always be a problem. And then instead of all procedural preparedness, etc., it becomes difficult to access the market. And in that case, for example, last year, because of the market conditions, it was decided that some of the disinvestment proposals will not be good to pursue because of the prices being offered at that point of time.
So market conditions, of course, play a big role, of course.
That is the biggest player, that is the biggest decider. Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much, Mr. Khan, for joining us. That was Mr. Haleem Khan, Disinvestment Secretary in the Ministry of Finance. And thank you so much, sir, for talking to us on the big picture. There you go. Mohammed Haleem Khan, who's in charge of the Disinvestment Department at the Finance Ministry, was of course talking to us. You, of course, heard what the Secretary had to say. Before I come to you, gentlemen, let me go to Subhomoy quickly and ask him this. Subhomoy, if you heard what Mr. Haleem Khan had to say about the challenges that he faces as Disinvestment Secretary, of course, he also mentioned the market sentiment, of course. Market volatility has prevented these scripts from coming in. How far do you blame the volatility in the market for the delay in these, say for example, NALCO or BHEL and other such, Hind Copper? Is it just market volatility, or are there other factors at play as well?
Well, it's not a question of just market volatility. The point is that the government is also, as Mr. Haleem Khan pointed out, that there is the problem that they have to list the companies by the deadline of June 2013. So that's a 25% requirement, public listing requirement, which SEBI has said is compulsory for all listed companies. So these companies, none of these issues that are going in are fresh issues, they are follow-on offers, which means that 25% has to be achieved. So there is that criteria that is there. And given all these things, the government is frankly battling on too many fronts, and it will be nice that they just don't look at because some of the good PSUs can actually change the tenor of the market. I can understand the government saying that yes, some of the issues will not get a good price, but at the same time, some of the issues are essentially very good issues. They could make a substantial change to the market sentiments.
Right. Subhomoy, at this point, gentlemen, we'll take a small break. We'll come back and we'll talk to you about what you think of these upcoming sales and the chances that investors will actually come and invest in these scripts. We'll be right back in just a bit. Don't go anywhere. More after this short break. Welcome back. You're still watching The Big Picture. Mr. Mehta, now the government needs cash to reduce the fiscal deficit and big ticket issues will obviously help. But no real game changers in this upcoming fiscal, are they? I mean, what do we have here? We have Oil India lined up, BHEL, RINL, Ispat Nigam Limited, as well as Hind Copper. Solid companies all, but no real money spinners. What do you think?
Actually, if you really see that, if SAIL had disinvested earlier, they would probably, government would have made much more money besides the interest money and all that, because now sale price is very low.
Yeah. It's gone down again today as well.
It's gone down again today, and at this price, probably I think this is a steal. It's a very beautiful company, and their share to be available at this price is, they will go like hotcakes.
Right, right.
Now the point is that to improve the market sentiment is again dependent on the government policy. And of course, I mean, like if the government decides, then all these issues which they have named, they are all very good money spinners also, and they will be able to bring a lot of new equity into the market.
Right.
More than that, as I said earlier, it will show the resolve of the government to introduce reforms further and to accelerate the process, which is what foreigners want. And that is how I think it will all get into a snowball effect and probably bring the markets back to good levels.
It's interesting you mentioned foreign investors as well as policy issues and reforms. I'd like to speak to you on that for a bit now. The kind of volumes the government is talking about definitely needs, Anjun, and you'd agree with me, significant change in the outlook in the equity investors as well, people who are going to invest. And the fact remains that investors, if my figures are correct, have pulled out over 350 million out of stocks between just April and June. It's going to be tough to attract investors for sale, for example, isn't it?
See, it's not very correct to say that sale of these public sector stocks can play the role of a game changer in the market. It will not, because the sentiment in the Indian market now.
I also meant in the sense, a game changer in the sense that it will raise enough cash for the government.
No, I mean it cannot, because I mean, after all, how much are you offering? You are raising 4,000 from sale, which is the biggest or about the biggest issue this time.
This year.
So 4,000 rupees, as I said earlier, it's nothing. Your fuel subsidy bill is over 140,000 crore. Right. So, I mean, look at the numbers we are playing with. It's very large. So this kind of disinvestment does not mean much, but it has a significance in terms of government's resolve to pursue certain basic fundamental reforms. And that is the significance of this. Market sentiment will not be much changed by these sales, because market sentiment has come to be very much dependent on the flow of funds from overseas, FII investment. Because of withdrawal of funds, as you have referred to, the market has tanked recently. And this is also related to the global situation. So, whether you want to sell your stocks at this price, as you was referring to, yeah, you have to approach the whole subject like a private corporate entity.
Right, right.
It is not once you have politically decided to disinvest, the handling of an issue will have to be exactly like a private corporate entity, and it should enter the market when it will maximize its price
Profits, right. And they should probably perhaps wait for that. Let me go to Subhomoy Bhattacharjee really quickly and ask him this. You heard what Anjun had to say. The gentleman, Mr. Haleem Khan, the Disinvestment Secretary, you heard the interview as well. He mentioned RINL, Rashtriya Ispat Nigam Limited. And he said that by the end of this month, perhaps that script will get approval, the necessary approval for it to hit the markets. But given the fact that sale took so long, Subhomoy, what are the chances that RINL will come out with the issue by the end of July? Very slim, aren't they?
Yeah, it does seem difficult. See, that's the point. Between the time that the cabinet approves any disinvestment and the time that it finally hits the market, there's almost a gap of 3 months. And that's been standard. It doesn't really depend on the size of the issue. It depends roughly on the procedures. So, given that, for the disinvestment department to be able to juggle 15 issues in a matter of 1 year, it's like almost having 2 or 3 balls continuously up in the air, and to be able to get them through, and then at the same all the time, you have to focus on those in disinvestments going through. Yet you have to ensure that the markets are not in a terrible amount of funk, because of which there is some amount that you want to pull back some of the issues. So it's a very complicated game that the government will have to play this year.
Right, Mr. Mehta. What about having a long-term investment goal or a process that apart from selling off the government stake in companies, public sector companies, also increases the efficiency of that particular unit? Do you feel that government needs to work a lot harder in that direction?
I think what I feel is that this is none of government's business to run these steel plants. There are so many other big problems which are waiting to be solved by the government. And when you show your intent, that is what is more important. Now, though as per SEBI guidelines also, they have to bring down the equity to 75% because they have to offer minimum 25% with the public. So, in this context, I mean, like, as he has very rightly pointed out, the money raised may not be much, but the intent is very important, and that is what I think will be accomplished through all these disinvestment programs.
Right. Mr. Roy, long-run privatization plans, in the long term, they continue to be difficult to implement for the government for political reasons or coalition dharma, whatever you want to call it. Politically contested economic reforms, I'd like to call it that, now opposed at one point or the other by all political parties. What is the way taking this forward? Even the NDA, when Arun Shourie was in charge, pushed really hard for disinvestment of companies that are doing well. The Congress is doing the same thing, the UPA is doing the same thing, but what is the way forward now? We've missed last year's target. It looks like we're going to miss this year's target. Is there a long-term strategy in place at all?
See, disinvestment is not happening not because of some technical problems or anything else, or market volatility. It is not happening because of political volatility. You have heard this gentleman. He is saying that he will be very happy if the government fails. Now, there are people who would be very happy if the government fails in all its efforts, not only disinvestment. But are we in a position to witness that kind of situation? Look at Air India. Air India at its heyday was one of the finest airlines in the world. Other people used to emulate and envy Air India. Today, look at the shape Air India is in. And you have got CEOs changing every now and then. What kind of handling of even pilots strike? The fact of the matter is that if you are running a company, it has to be run like a company. You cannot run like it like a government department.
Right.
And this is plaguing all the PSUs. Not that PSU as such per se is inefficient, but when government interferes in everyday affairs, then it becomes inefficient.
Right.
So the alternative is either you put up with this inefficiency or try to make a break with that and achieve proper handling of this, running of these
Right.
units.
Subhomoy Bhattacharjee, let me go to Subhomoy Bhattacharjee. I'll give him the last word on the show. Subhomoy, now there are two options for the government here. They can either go for the newly introduced OFS or offer for sale or the auction route. Which do you think sounds like a better bet, and which do you think the government will go with on sale?
OFS is not as easy as it was made out. You remember in the ONGC case, there was a major goof up. I would differ here with Anjun when you say that it's not just a technical problem. There is a technical problem that could appear, especially on these big issues. In terms of numbers, I think disinvestment number is just second to the spectrum issue. So definitely there is a very good reason, economic rationale for going ahead with disinvestment. If you're saying which is the fastest way, I think the government will have to go in for the OFS, because that is where the process can be done the fastest. But repeatedly resorting to that mechanism could have its implication on how the retail investors perceive the usefulness of the disinvestment program for them. And definitely it will not be something which the large body of investors may not particularly feel very comfortable about.
Right.
So there is only that much that you can do with that route.
Right, right. Thank you, Subhomoy, for those comments. Do you agree with Subhomoy? We have very little time left, but do you agree with Subhomoy?
Well, I think so far as I feel that the auction route is going to be more beneficial, because though it depends on the terms as to how retail investors are going to be benefited, because at the current price of sale, if we go, we will have to offer it around the current price. Whereas in the auction, the rate could be reflecting the real net worth of the company.
Right,
So I think that would be a much important route to go by. And retail investor, if they are interested to pick up the shares of sale, since it's not an initial IPO or initial public offer, they can always go to the market and pick up the shares at the current price.
Right, right.
And the only problem with the FPO route is, the auction route is going to be that the major chunk will go to the large institutions, and then it will not bring additional liquidity in the market. And this kind of large chunk going to single form of investors, say foreign investors, then they will be in a position to offload at a much higher price, and that will destabilize the sale share price further.
Point taken. So I must thank all my guests before I sign out. Subhomoy Bhattacharjee, thank you so much for joining us. Also, Mr. Vijay Mehta and Mr. Anjun Roy as well. Tapan Sen also joined us for a bit. Thank you, Tapan Sen, for joining us. Of course, the latest on the sale issue is, of course, the CCEA was supposed to discuss it tonight in that meeting, but we understand that it might take just yet another week to get cabinet approval. Remember, we had that exclusive interview with the Disinvestment Secretary. I have to sign off there. Till next time, goodbye, good night, and thank you for watching.